I have quite an amazing story for you this morning from the book of Exodus. It's a story about power and the abuse of power. It's about standing up to power. It's about good and evil and the amazing choices that people make. It's about having faith in God. It's just an incredible story, and some of it is actually very troubling. I just want to say that. And if I just said the word bulrushes to you, would you know maybe who we're talking about this morning? Yeah. So a time came in Egypt where there was a new Pharaoh. Now, in previous times, when Joseph was around, there were actually pretty good relationships between the Hebrews and the Egyptians. But this was a new Pharaoh, and the relationships were not good. And actually, the Pharaoh was very concerned about the Hebrews because there were so many of them, and there seemed to be more and more. And he thought, you know, if there were a war or something, these people could join with my enemies and fight back. He was very threatened by them. And he wasn't going to just let that go. So he made this decision that he was going to make life difficult for the Hebrews and just set about to systematically oppress them. He put them into forced labor. They had to build these cities on his behalf. And he just made life really hard for them, working day in and day out for the things that he wanted and to sap their energy so that they couldn't rise up. And he took this step, which is really the most shocking one. He brought some of the midwives, the Hebrew midwives in, and two of them in particular are named in this story, Shiphrah and Puah. And he said to them, when you go to a Hebrew woman who is having a baby, if that woman has a boy child, I want you to kill him, to not let him live. That is amazing, that he would say that he would do that. But it says in the story that these were faithful, very faithful men who believed in God, who had their faith in God, and so they refused really to do what the king had said, but they didn't do it to his face. They did it kind of behind his back, and the Pharaoh kind of noticed, well, this isn't working. So he brought them back in, and he said, why isn't this working? And the Hebrew women said, well, you know how it is with Hebrew women. When they give birth quickly, and we're not there in time. Now, if that wasn't a clever response, and to be able to say that to the Pharaoh, that takes a lot of courage. And God, it says in the story, God looked down on these women and the midwives with favor, and the Hebrews continued to multiply, which was exactly the opposite of what the Pharaoh was trying to accomplish. And so he took this next, even more kind of draconian step. And again, shocking. This story is shocking. And I want you to be shocked this morning by this. He decided that every boy child should be thrown in the river. The girl children would be allowed to live, but all of the boy children would be killed. So there was a Levi man who married a woman. The woman's name was Jochebed, and they had a baby during this time, a baby boy. And for 3 months, they hid the child as best they could to save the boy's life. But after a while, with a 3-month-old child, it just doesn't work. So again, she took this kind of strange and attack. She took a basket made of reeds, and she covered it with pitch. She put the baby in the basket, and she took it down to the river. She put it into the river and gave it a push out into the Nile. And the basket either was sitting there by the side of the river, or it had floated down the river to a place where the Pharaoh's daughter would come to bathe. She would come to bathe, her servants would be around. So she came down to the river, and there was this basket. And she looked in the basket, and there was a child in this basket. And of course, that must have been an amazing thing. And immediately, and this is the other shocking thing, immediately she recognized this must be a Hebrew child. Now, this is the daughter of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was setting the rules. She would have known the rules about what was supposed to happen to these children, but she didn't respond. in the way that the Pharaoh would have expected. She took the child and had sympathy for it, compassion. So as the basket was sitting in the water, the baby's sister, which of course would have been Miriam, was standing nearby. And so when Miriam saw that the Pharaoh's daughter had seen the baby and had taken the baby, she came up to the Pharaoh's daughter and said, "Would you like for me to find a nurse for this child?" Can you imagine a young girl standing by the river and talking to the Pharaoh's daughter in this way, a Hebrew talking to an Egyptian, a royal Egyptian? And so here's what happened. The Pharaoh's daughter said, "Yes, do that." And so Miriam went to find a nurse, Jochebed, the boy's mother. And Jochebed got to nurse this child and to let it grow. And when it was grown a little bit, the Pharaoh's daughter took this child into her own home, this Hebrew child into her own home. And she named him Moses, because that means I found this child on the water. It's amazing, these stories in the Bible. They're just amazing.